They've released specialized beetles to eat it. They've spent millions on herbicides to poison it. And if you grow it in certain counties, you're looking at a fine that could buy a new tractor. Why? Because this plant violates the most profitable rule in modern history: food should be hard to grow. Think about that for a second. We've been conditioned to believe that survival is a struggle. We're told that to feed a family, you need industrial machinery, rows of chemical fertilizers, and a direct line to a global supply chain that could snap at any moment. But hanging right above your head is a plant that produces 400 pounds of food with zero digging, no tilling, no corporate patents. Just 8,000 years of pure, unadulterated independence hanging from a vine like grapes. For centuries, this was the Viking of the botanical world. It didn't just grow, it conquered. Ancient voyagers, people who understood the brutal reality of survival better than any modern expert, chose this plant above almost all others. When they climbed into those tiny wooden canoes to cross thousands of miles of empty, unpredictable ocean, they had no room for dead weight. They didn't take ornamental flowers. They took what was essential. They took the air potato. They knew that once they hit land, they needed a crop that didn't care about poor soil. They needed a crop that would feed their children in the first season without needing a degree in agronomy. This plant was their insurance policy, their freedom, their legacy. And yet, today, 18 states have labeled it a criminal. Most people will scroll past this video. They'll keep moving because they've been trained, conditioned. They believe that if food isn't wrapped in plastic and sold by a conglomerate with a smiley face on the bag, it's just a weed. They've traded their intuition for a grocery store loyalty card. But you're still here. You're one of the few who still believes in true food sovereignty. You understand that the system doesn't want you to have a backyard that produces a year's worth of calories for free. If you're ready to reclaim that independence, hit subscribe right now. Don't let the algorithm bury the only knowledge that actually makes you free. If you stay silent, the system wins. If you join us, we keep the knowledge alive. Now, look at the numbers they're trying to hide from you. One single mature vine of Dioscorea bulbifera can produce up to 400 individual bulbs in a single season. We're talking about a plant that grows 20 to 40 feet in a few months. It doesn't take up your precious yard space because it grows vertically. It stacks food in three-dimensional space. While your neighbors are breaking their backs, tilling soil and fighting weeds for a few baskets of traditional potatoes, you could be standing in the shade, picking dinner off a trellis. This is the ultimate lazy crop, but don't let that fool you. This is high-level strategy. In a world where fertilizer costs are skyrocketing and the climate is becoming a roll of the dice, the air potato is a cheat code. It has a reservoir tuber underground that acts like a biological battery. It stores water, it stores nutrients. When a drought hits that turns a standard potato field into a graveyard, the air potato doesn't even flinch. It keeps producing. It's built for the worst-case scenario. But this isn't just about survival. It's about moral superiority. It's about looking at a broken agricultural system and saying, I don't need you. Every time you harvest a bulbil from your own vine, you are withdrawing your support from a system that wants you dependent. You're opting out of the chemicals. You're opting out of the debt. You're choosing the path of the prepared. The disconnect is absolutely stunning. We have rising food insecurity, yet our tax dollars are being used to develop biological warfare, literally releasing insects specifically engineered to destroy a high-yield food crop. They tell you it's about protecting the ecosystem, but ask yourself, why did the USDA promote this exact plant 100 years ago? The plant didn't change. Its DNA is the same as it was in those Polynesian canoes. What changed was the business model. You can't patent a plant that grows itself. You can't sell a subscription to something that drops free seeds every autumn. This is your chance to get ahead of the curve, before the restrictions get tighter, before the knowledge is scrubbed from the search results. We're going to dive deep into exactly how to identify the edible varieties, how to bypass the toxin scare tactics with traditional preparation, and how to turn a tiny backyard into a calorie-producing powerhouse. The system wants you to be a consumer. I want you to be a producer. By the end of this, you won't just see a vine, you'll see an escape hatch. Next up, we're going into the botanical vault, the 8,000-year-old secrets of the canoe plants, and why your ancestors would be shocked that you're even allowed to buy a potato in a store. Stick around. The truth is heavier than the harvest. To understand why the modern system is so terrified of this plant, you have to look back at the ancestral file. This isn't just a weed that popped up in a Florida swamp. We are talking about 8,000 years of documented human survival. 8 millennia. That's a timeline that makes the entire history of the United States look like a weekend trip. It started in the humidity of Southeast Asia. From there, it didn't just spread, it migrated like a conqueror. It moved into the heart of Africa and across the vast, terrifying expanse of the Pacific Ocean. But it didn't move by accident. It wasn't carried by birds or the wind. It was carried by people who knew that if they lost this plant, they lost their future. Think about the Polynesian voyagers. Picture this. You're about to launch a hand-carved wooden canoe into the largest ocean on Earth. You have no GPS, no satellite phone, no way to call for help if things go wrong. Every square inch of that canoe is more valuable than gold. You have to choose between extra water, tools for defense, or seeds for the future. You can only bring the elite, the canoe plants. They chose Dioscorea bulbifera. Why? Because they weren't looking for a hobby. They were looking for a miracle. They needed a crop that could survive the salt spray of the ocean. They needed a plant that, once tucked into the soil of a strange new island, would explode with life. And that is the lazy miracle of the air potato. You don't need to be a master gardener. You don't need a degree in soil science. Those ancient voyagers knew that even a child could plant a bulbul and within a single season have a harvest that could save a village. It grows in the dirt that kills corn. It thrives in the shade that stunts wheat. It thrives on neglect. While the rest of the world's civilized crops demand constant attention, constant watering, and constant tilling, the air potato just performs. It is the ultimate survival tool for the person who refuses to be a slave to their garden. In West Africa, this plant became so vital, it wasn't just food, it was the heartbeat of the culture. Entire agricultural calendars were synchronized to the rhythm of this vine. They didn't just plant it, they built their festivals around it, their ceremonies, their weddings. They knew that as long as the vine was climbing, the community was safe. It wasn't a supplemental vegetable, it was the insurance policy against famine. When the rains failed and the other crops withered into dust, the air potato's underground battery tuber stayed cool and hydrated, ready to pump life into the vines. That's the level of preparedness we've lost. That's the independence they took from us. They replaced this ancient, resilient wisdom with a system where you are one missed paycheck or one supply chain disruption away from an empty plate. They want you to think that growing food is a complex, fragile mystery that only Big Ag can solve. They want you to feel small. But when you hold one of these aerial tubers in your hand, you're holding 8,000 years of defiance. You're holding the same energy that fueled the greatest navigators in human history. Ask yourself, if this plant was essential enough to be carried across oceans in a canoe, why is it dangerous now? If it could sustain entire civilizations through droughts that lasted years, why are we being told to spray it with poison? The answer is simple. Independence is the only thing the system can't tax. Control is the only thing they can't harvest from a vine you grow for free. The people who carried these plants knew something we've forgotten. They knew that true power doesn't come from a grocery store. It comes from the soil and the vine. It comes from being the person who is ready when everyone else is panicking. You have a choice right now. You can continue to be a spectator in a world designed to keep you hungry and dependent, or you can become a guardian of the knowledge that actually matters. Most people will watch this and do nothing. They'll go back to their comfortable, fragile lives. But you're still here because you feel that pull. You feel that ancient urge to be prepared, to be independent, to be better than the system expects you to be. Hit that subscribe button, not for me, but for your own future. Don't let the gatekeepers of information win this round. If you don't secure this knowledge now, don't be surprised when it's gone for good. We are building a community of people who refuse to be helpless. We are the ones who grow the things they don't want us to have. Next, we're peeling back the curtain on the invasive lie. I'm going to show you exactly how the narrative was flipped in the 1970s and the real reason why 18 states are spending your tax dollars to kill your food. This is where the story gets ugly. This is where you find out who's really in charge of your dinner table. Stay tuned, you can't afford to miss this. Now we're getting into the part of the file that should make your blood boil. If you think the invasive species label is about protecting butterflies and songbirds, you haven't been paying attention. This is a story about a 180-degree turn that would make a politician dizzy. Let's go back to 1905. The United States Department of Agriculture wasn't trying to kill the air potato, they were actually its biggest cheerleaders. I'm talking about official government bulletins, printed on taxpayer paper, calling Dioscorea bulbifera a promising food crop for small farms. They were literally mailing these to farmers in the South, telling them to plant it. They saw the productivity. They saw the resilience. They saw a plant that could feed the American worker for pennies. So, what happened? Why did the miracle crop of 1905 become the noxious weed of the 1970s? The shift didn't happen because the plant changed. The plant was still the same high-yielding, 3D growing powerhouse it had been for 8,000 years. What changed was the business of food. By the 1970s, agriculture wasn't about feeding people anymore. It was about selling a system. And the air potato? It's a glitch in that system's matrix. Let's run the economic threat analysis. This is the real reason they want it dead. First, the patent problem. You can't own it. Corporate giants like Monsanto and Syngenta make their billions by owning the life cycle of a plant. They genetically modify a seed, patent the DNA, and then sue you if you try to save those seeds for next year. But the air potato propagates itself freely. Every single bulb that drops to the ground is a new, perfect clone. It is the ultimate open-source technology. It belongs to the earth, not a boardroom in St. Louis. Second, the input problem. Modern industrial farming is a pay-to-play game. You need the heavy machinery for tilling. You need the synthetic nitrogen fertilizers. You need the chemical pesticides. The corporations make a profit at every single step of that process. But the air potato doesn't need any of it. No fertilizer, no pesticides. It thrives in poor soil and ignores pests. When you grow this vine, the agrochemical lobby loses a customer, and they hate losing customers. Third, the 3D advantage. This is the one that really scares them. Traditional agriculture is flat. It requires thousands of acres of cleared, tilled land so that $500,000 tractors can drive in straight lines. It's a two-dimensional model designed for machines, not people. But the air potato grows vertically. It stacks food in three-dimensional space. You can grow 300 pounds of food on a trellis the size of a closet. You don't need a tractor. You don't need a massive land grant. You just need a fence. The system hates verticality because verticality is the path to small-scale independence. It allows a single family on a quarter acre to produce more carbohydrates than a commercial farmer with 10 times the space. That is a direct threat to the industrial monopoly. So, how did they fight back? They didn't just ban it, they started a war, biological warfare, funded by your tax dollars. They traveled to China, found a specialized insect called Lilioceris cheney, the air potato beetle, and they released it by the thousands in Florida and across the South. Think about that. While food prices are hitting record highs, while people are struggling to put groceries on the table, the government is spending millions of dollars to spread beetles specifically engineered to eat a high-calorie survival crop. They call it restoring the balance. I call it destroying the competition. They want you to believe that this plant is a pest because it grows too well. Let that sink in for a second. In what world is a plant that grows too well and produces too much food a bad thing? Only in a world where food is used as a tool for control. By labeling it invasive, they give themselves the legal right to trespass on your property, spray toxic herbicides on your land, and fine you for harboring noxious weeds. It's about moral superiority. They want to make you feel like a bad citizen for wanting to be self-sufficient. They want you to feel guilty for growing a plant that doesn't require a purchase from their approved vendors. This is why you need to be prepared. This is why you need to be the one who knows how to spot the difference between an invasive label and a survival tool. Most people will follow the rules right into a famine. They'll wait for the government to tell them what's safe to grow, but you know better. You know that true independence is grown, not granted. If you're starting to see the strings on the puppet, hit that subscribe button right now. We are the ones who look at the noxious weed list and see a shopping list for freedom. Don't let them shame you into dependency. Join the resistance of the prepared. Next, we're going to look at the actual science, the botanical specs that make this plant an absolute beast in the garden. I'm going to show you the battery tuber and why this vine is practically immortal. You need to see how it builds its own water reservoir to laugh at droughts. Stick with me, we're just getting started. Let's strip away the politics for a second and look at the raw botanical specs. When you understand the science of Dioscorea bulbifera, you realize it's not just a plant. It's a biological masterpiece designed for maximum efficiency. It is the ultimate survival engine. First, let's talk fuel. We've been raised on the russet potato, the king of the industrial food chain. But the russet is a sugar spike waiting to happen. It hits your system, sends your insulin through the roof, and leaves you crashing an hour later. The air potato plays a different game. It has a significantly lower glycemic index. This is sustained, slow-burn energy. It's the kind of fuel that kept those Polynesian voyagers rowing for days on end. But it's more than just calories. These bulbs are loaded with something called resistant starch. This is a holy grail for gut health. It doesn't digest in your small intestine. It travels down to your colon and acts as a massive prebiotic, feeding the beneficial bacteria that run your immune system. While the processed world is suffering from chronic inflammation and gut issues, the air potato is literally building a fortress inside your digestive tract. This is the nutrition they don't want you to have. Food that makes you stronger, not more dependent on the pharmacy. Now, look at how it grows. It uses counterclockwise twining. This isn't just a fun fact for botanists, it's an engineering marvel. The vine spirals up, grabbing onto anything: fences, dead trees, old poles with a grip that would make a rock climber jealous. It doesn't need expensive support systems. It climbs the world on its own terms. And then there's the double harvest. This is where the efficiency gets truly absurd. Most crops give you one shot. You grow a potato, you dig it up, it's over. But the air potato gives you two separate food sources from one single plant. You have the aerial bulbils, the potatoes hanging in the air that you can harvest all summer and fall without ever touching a shovel. But while you're picking dinner off the vine, the plant is quietly building a second, massive tuber deep underground. We're talking about tubers that can weigh 20 pounds or more. It's a literal vault of starch hidden beneath the surface. And here is the secret weapon, the reservoir tuber. Think of it like a biological battery. While your corn and beans are gasping for air in a heat wave, the air potato is sitting on a massive storage tank of water and nutrients. It acts like a reservoir. When a drought hits, the kind of drought that turns industrial fields into dust bowls, this vine doesn't even slow down. It just draws from its own internal battery and keeps pumping out food. It's a drought-resistant powerhouse that thrives when the system fails. But here's the reality check. The system spends millions making sure you never see this data. They want you focused on crops that are fragile. They want you dependent on seeds that need life support from chemical companies just to survive a dry week. If you've found value in this research so far, if you can see the difference between a real survival crop and the weak, industrial versions we've been fed, hit the like button on this video right now. This isn't about vanity, it's a signal. Every like tells the algorithm that we want the truth, not the propaganda. If you don't engage, you're essentially voting for the eradication of this knowledge. You're letting the system win the information war. Be the person who signals for freedom. The air potato is a challenge to everything we think we know about agriculture. It proves that food doesn't have to be a struggle. It can be a relentless, climbing force that feeds your family while you sleep. It grows in poor soil, ignores the heat, and builds its own water supply. It's built for the person who wants to be ready for anything. It's built for the person who wants to be independent. And once you understand the science, you realize why they're so desperate to keep it out of your backyard. They can't compete with a plant that works this hard for free. Next, we're getting into the life or death part of this file, the safe harvest protocol. I'm going to show you exactly how to identify the edible varieties from the ones that could land you in the hospital. I'll break down the wart test and the ancestral soaking methods that turn this vine into a gourmet meal. This is the bridge between having a weed in your yard and having a pantry full of gold. Stay focused. This is the part they really don't want you to know. This is the part where we separate the amateurs from the masters. If you're going to step outside the industrial system, you have to carry the light of knowledge. You can't just go grazing in the woods. The system uses safety as a weapon to keep you scared and dependent, but our ancestors didn't have a FDA, they had observation. They had the safe harvest protocol. Listen closely, because this is the life or death distinction. There are two main players in the world of Dioscorea bulbifera. You have the Asian variety, which has been the backbone of human nutrition for thousands of years. And you have certain wild African or Americanized wild varieties that are packed with an alkaloid called Dioscorin. That stuff is toxic. It's bitter. It's the plant's own chemical defense system. How do you tell them apart without a lab? You use the wart test. It's a simple visual binary. The edible, cultivated varieties, the ones our ancestors carried in those canoes, are generally smooth. They're rounded. They look like clean, tan potatoes hanging from a vine. The toxic varieties, they look like they're from a horror movie. They are angular. They have warts or sharp, irregular bumps all over the skin. They look defensive. If it looks like it's wearing armor, leave it alone. But identification goes deeper than just the fruit. You need to look at the architecture of the vine itself. First, look at the leaves. We're talking about perfect emerald green hearts, usually 4 to 8 inches across. But here is the zigzag rule. Look at how those leaves attach to the stem. On a true air potato, the leaves are alternate. They don't sit directly across from each other like twins. They stagger, one on the left, then a gap, then one on the right. If they are growing in pairs directly opposite each other, you're looking at a different species. Next, touch the stem. This is the hairy stem warning. A true Dioscorea bulbifera is smooth. It's sleek. If the stem feels fuzzy, hairy, or prickly, pull your hand back. It's not the one. Our ancestors knew these markers by heart because their lives depended on it. In a world of instant information, being able to read a plant's physical language is the ultimate form of preparedness. Now, let's talk about the kitchen, because even with the edible variety, you never, and I mean never, eat these raw. The raw food trend is a modern luxury that doesn't apply to survival staples. Preparation is an act of alchemy. The ancestral method starts with the soak. You peel them, you dice them, and you submerge them in cold water. You're looking for a 2 to 4 hour leach, changing the water at least twice. What are you doing? You're using science to remove any trace bitter compounds. You're washing the starch. Traditional cooks in West Africa will sometimes soak them overnight. They aren't in a rush. They know that patience is the price of purity. Once they're leached, you have 2 paths to greatness. You can boil them, which gives you a dense, satisfying texture that's sturdier than a russet. It holds up in stews, absorbing the fats and spices without turning into mush. But if you want to experience the true soul of this plant, you roast it. When you toss those soaked chunks in oil and salt and hit them with high heat, something magical happens. The low moisture content means they get crispier than any potato you've ever had. The flavor profile, it's nutty, it's earthy, it's like a cross between a Yukon Gold and a roasted chestnut. It's a gourmet experience that Big Ag could never replicate because their potatoes are bred for shelf life, not soul. Knowing this protocol gives you a level of moral superiority over the fearful masses. While they're terrified of wild food, you're sitting there with a pantry full of calorie-dense gold that you identified, harvested, and prepared with your own 2 hands. You aren't just eating, you're practicing a form of resistance. You are reclaiming a skill set that was intentionally scrubbed from our collective memory. This is the bridge to independence. You aren't just buying food, you're mastering a system. You're becoming the person people will turn to when the grocery store shelves are stripped bare. If you're ready to stop being a consumer and start being a practitioner of these ancient truths, stay tuned. We're moving next into the Grow Lazy system. I'm going to show you how to set up a zero-input, high-yield vertical farm in your own backyard, even if you have zero experience. This is the final step in your journey to food freedom. Let's get growing. Now we arrive at the methodology. This is the Grow Lazy system in its purest form. If you are out there tilling the earth, sweating over rows of delicate plants, and measuring fertilizer by the gram, you are working too hard. You are playing the industrial game with amateur tools. The air potato demands a different approach. It demands that you step back and let biology do the heavy lifting. Planting this crop is almost insultingly simple. You take that bulb, that potential energy bomb, and you bury it 2 to 4 inches deep in loose soil. That's it. But here is the critical lazy metric. Space them 10 feet apart. I'm serious. 10 feet. This isn't a fragile tomato plant that needs a support buddy. This is a green monster. If you plant them too close, they will tangle into an impenetrable jungle. You give them room because they are going to conquer that space. But you cannot let them conquer the ground. This is a vertical war. You need the ultimate infrastructure. Forget those flimsy wooden stakes or the cute little tomato cages sold at the big box stores. They will crush those by July. You need cattle panels, thick, galvanized steel welded wire. You arch them over a walkway or secure them against T-posts. Why? Because a single vine can carry hundreds of pounds of biomass. When that trellis is loaded with 400 pounds of hanging food, you want steel holding it up, not hope. This is infrastructure that lasts a lifetime. You buy it once, and it serves you forever. Now, let's talk maintenance, or rather, the lack of it. This is where the system tries to trick you. They want you to believe that more is better. They want you to dump synthetic nitrogen on your soil to make things green. With the air potato, nitrogen is the enemy. If you pump this plant with high nitrogen fertilizer, it will laugh at you. It will produce gorgeous, massive leaves, a beautiful green wall, and zero food. It switches into vegetative mode. The grow lazy method is mulch and wait. You cover the base with heavy organic matter, wood chips, straw, dead leaves, and you walk away. The mulch holds the moisture. The plant finds its own nutrients. You are not a manager, you are an observer. How do you know when it's payday? The plant tells you. We use the gentle twist test. Walk up to a hanging bulb, give it a tiny, barely there rotation. If it fights you, if you have to pull, it's not ready. It's still pumping nutrients into that bulb. But if it pops off into your hand with the slightest touch, or if it falls to the ground on its own, it's done. It's perfect. You don't guess. You don't dig. You just catch what falls. This brings us to the bigger picture. Why does this matter? Why have I spent 30 minutes talking about a vine? Because the air potato is a metaphor. It represents a lost way of life, where food was a gift from the earth, not a commodity sold back to you by a corporation. Every time you harvest a bucket of these tubers, you are stepping out of the scarcity loop. You are proving that abundance is the natural state of the world when we stop trying to control it with chemicals and patents. The authorities call it invasive because it refuses to die. I call it resilient because it refuses to quit. Now, a word of caution for the wise. Check your local laws. In some places, the system has made growing this act of independence illegal. Be smart, don't get fined, but never ever stop learning. Knowledge is the one thing they can't confiscate. Growing this vine isn't just gardening. It is an act of archiving human history. You are becoming a living library. You are keeping a genetic line alive that has fed humanity for 8,000 years, protecting it from a system that wants to hit the delete button. You are the guardian of the old ways. Next week, we are escalating. I'm revealing a banned crop that produces complete protein. I'm talking meat replacement levels of amino acids without a single animal. And yes, they are trying to ban that one too. They are terrified of it. Subscribe and turn on notifications right now, because if you don't, the algorithm will bury this channel. It will make sure you never find your way back to this corner of the internet. Do not lose the link to your own food freedom. I'll see you in the garden. Grow lazy, grow free.